Okay, good morning. This is Ed Correa. Thank you for joining us for another in our series of Sagazin Technologies educational webinars. As usual, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to registered attendees a bit later. I'd like to make it clear that we enjoy questions during the webinar. And if you look at the panel, the control panel for this webinar, there's a section in there that says questions. And I'd encourage you to expand that section and type questions during the webinar if you like. I'll do my best to answer those questions during the webinar. And if I don't, I'll get to them at the end in the Q&A session. Let's get started. Today our speaker is, drumroll, myself. I'm Ed Correa. I'm president and CEO of Sagazin Technologies, and I've been a technology junkie or fanatic, for whichever you prefer, for 41 years. My company, Sagazin Technologies, is a leading technology management and security firm here in Silicon Valley, and we're close to wrapping up our 18th year in business. In fact, I'm very much looking forward to January 1 and our 19th anniversary. Sagazin is focused on businesses, most frequently professional service firms like medical, legal, insurance, accounting, and finance, who really care about business operations. They want technology and services in place to guarantee their business functionality, business continuity, the security of their data, and compliance with any regulations that their industry is subject to. Anyway, a little bit about some of our recognitions. Some of our most recent recognitions. For myself, I was awarded the Channel Pro 2020 Visionary Awards. It recognizes the top 20 visionaries in IT in 2015 and 2016. I was also recognized and honored in 2016, 15, 14, and 13 as one of the top 250 people in IT, as recognized by MSP Mentor magazine. I'm most proud, however, of the awards that Sagazin itself has been recognized for. My company, Sagazin, was recognized by MSP Mentor in the top 150 managed service providers on the planet for 6 years running, 2018 through 2013. And the bottom award there that ends in SBE, that little SBE stands for Small Business Edition. Sagazin was also recognized as being in that top 105 MSPs who have less than 10 employees. I don't think we're going to continue to win that award because we're growing, and it's going to be hard to be eligible for that Small Business Edition. But both awards are pretty nice to receive and make me pretty happy. Anyway. As always, this webinar is being recorded. Here's a little snapshot of the control panel and where the questions section is. I really encourage you to ask questions during the webinar. I will do my best to answer those questions during the webinar. And if I don't, I'll get to them in the Q&A section at the end. Let's get started. So why are we here today? Well, I have 5 objectives that I want to go through and make things clear. I want to define what identity theft is. I want to explain why it is actually a huge business problem. I'm going to detail the many ways of how your employees' identities can be stolen. I'm going to walk you through my 5 recommendations for protecting businesses from identity theft for business. And finally, I'll do my best to answer those questions, as I've said a couple times. And we'll wrap up with some very special offers at the end, so I hope you stick around to the very end of this presentation. Identity theft is not a new concept. Wikipedia defines it, identity theft as the deliberate use of someone else's identity, usually as a method to gain financial advantage or obtain credit or other benefits of that person's name and perhaps other person's disadvantage or loss. We're all very aware of identity theft for individuals, but most business owners tend to be not understanding that this also happens in business. If you look online, it's easy to find numerous articles on what the thieves do to gain access to individual identities, but you find far less information online about identity theft and its effects on business. One of the reasons that we're here today is because I'm regularly seeing businesses that are falling victim to this. The last 6 months, I think we're averaging 3 businesses per month that are falling victim to these attacks. And usually it's out of ignorance. And so I thought, you know what? I need to do something to educate people about what this is. So I really hope that this helps you and your business, and you feel more informed, and you're able to tell other people about what you've learned. So why is identity theft affecting businesses? Well, there are 3 main reasons. Your employees are regularly receiving attempts to trick them into doing helping hackers or bad actors or whatever we want to call them get into either your systems, your bank accounts, your email accounts. The security of business has improved dramatically over the last 10, 15 years. But the weakest link at companies are your employees. It's that human psychology. These hackers are using a variety of attacks, usually via media, and this media might be email, social media, or phone calls, where they're trying to trick your employees into giving them access to sensitive systems, or giving them credentials in order to get access and do other things. Like, very often we'll see people, I'll talk about this in a special slide, but trying to pretend they're your CEO and we need to transfer funds, or gee, I'm the CEO and I can't remember the account number for that account. It's all for the financial benefit of these hackers. And compared to how much we think about the problem of personal identity theft, business identity theft can be seen as almost an afterthought. Anyway, so number 3 on the list is your employees are doing this because you haven't trained them adequately. And that's a big issue. And that's one of the things we like to do here at Sagacent, but the first thing is to make business owners aware that this problem exists. Before I change slides, I'm going to say a lot of people are asking, they missed the beginning. Will the recording be available? Can I get the slides? Absolutely. We always make those available a bit later after the program. To continue. So now I can already hear many of you saying in my head, why doesn't our IT software, hardware, our systems protect us? Well, it's a little bit like this. I like this analogy. You buy a car. You have your IT team put great locks and an alarm system in that car, and they're supporting and maintaining that car for you. You give that car to an employee so he or she can work. And then that employee either gives someone else the car keys, leaves the doors open, or leaves the windows rolled down. No security system is going to prevent the bad guys from getting into that car. And when we're talking about identity theft for business, that's exactly what's happening. They're tricking your employees into giving them access to some resource that they want. And while companies are often telling me, well, we have antivirus, we have data encryption, we have a firewall, those are all a good start, but it's not going to protect the company completely. That's why we're here. So you might also be saying, well, how big of a problem is this really? What does it cost? This slide is from the Poneman Institute, and they're a company I love to read their reports. But in this indication, what they were doing is they were saying globally, on average, based on the size of the business, what was the financial impact of a hack? So we're seeing at 1.9 million, if the company had less than 10,000 records, the cost was 1.9 million. For a company with 10,000 to 25,000 records being accessed, the cost was more. And then you're seeing the gargantuan companies with more than 50,000 records. The average cost globally was 6.3 million. The point is, everybody is at risk. These bad guys love going after businesses because they know that they can get more reliable monies out of them, and in larger quantities they can than when they go after individuals. And sadly, businesses have not done the diligent security systems and practices, to say nothing of training of the employees, that are going to protect them. It's why you see it in the news all the time. Next, what are the business impacts? Well, there's different areas to look at, and one of the reasons I have 3 different slides here is because they are from 3 different organizations, but they all say the same thing. The first one on the left from Accenture talks about the 3 largest areas that a business is impacted on, the largest being the loss of information, and that can be enough to put a business out of business. The second major cost to that business is the business disruption. They're not able to conduct business operations. And the third being the revenue loss. Now, that second chart down at the bottom, that's from the Poneman Institute, which I've already talked to again, but you're going to notice the 3 largest wedges there correspond to what the Accenture report says. And then if you look at the far right one, it's very similar as well. They're saying the largest business impacts, or the economic loss, was business interruption, reputation loss, and then they also go into filing of liability claims from the data breach, and then the restoration. You can tell that third one's from an insurance company. So they're all saying the same things. The impacts are huge and they are costly. So next, what I'd like to talk about is, what are the steps that these hackers are going through to prepare, execute, and then after an attack, clean up. This is a very nice slide. It came from the company Imperva, and they talk about the 4 stages that generically most hackers go through. There's a preparation stage where they're identifying who we're going to go after. Okay, maybe we're going to go after just financial operations, maybe just accounting shops, maybe just medical operations, maybe law firms. And they're going to tailor an attack by gaining information about that company and specifically scripting an attack to fit that company. Then they're going to execute the attack with the offering, and they're going to spin a story, and they're going to convince those employees that whatever media they're coming through, whether it be email, phone, or meeting the person in person, which still happens, that person will fall victim, and then we execute. And if we're just trying to convince, if it's a quick attack, we're just trying to convince them to click something, or to give us a phone number or some bit of information we want, those are relatively quick. Some of them are much more involved. Many of the ones we're seeing lately is they're going after people's email accounts in the cloud, because often the IT people don't have the visibility of the cloud email they did when it was in-house. And they're masquerading as employees within the company. We saw one a couple months ago where they got into the email as the company president. They started masquerading as the CFO. They were having conversations in emails mimicking what they'd seen in other emails, involved the bank in some requests, and happily the banker was skeptical because the request was so unusual that he reached out and talked to these people at the company in person, and it saved their bacon. We were hired to come in after the fact and give an audit and determine how this happened. Why wasn't there security stopping it? So we, unfortunately for us, we usually hear about these after the fact, after they've been perpetrated, but this was a happy ending because the hackers hadn't gotten anything. Anyway, stage 4 of this process is they then try to remove all traces of the malware. Very contrary to popular opinion, the hackers don't want you to know that they were there. When I got started in IT in the 80s, hackers did this for a lark. It was for giggles and grins. They wanted to boost their reputation. Today, hacking is all for financial gain. And there's nothing better than hacking a company, taking what they have today, and leaving no trace so that you can come back later and get more. So they don't necessarily want you knowing that they were there. And we're seeing time and time again where companies get hacked, but don't notice they were hacked for many months later, sometimes years. It is very common that when my company is performing IT audits, we'll come in and we'll see the signs that they were hacked, and the company had no knowledge at all that this had ever happened. So this slide is one of two, and I'm calling this methods number one. And the point of this is that attacks on companies often utilize multiple things. So you'll see a report like this one at the right, and it'll say, well, this attack featured breaching of the network, or it employed malware, or the hackers breached leveraging stolen or weak passwords. In reality, many of these attacks leverage many of these things. So when I see one of these charts, I'm always telling myself, okay, well, they probably employed all four to do what they did. It wasn't just one. Novices will tend to believe the chart and say, oh, well, all we need to do, see, the biggest thing on here was weak passwords. We're going to fix our passwords. We'll be okay. Security is a complex thing. It requires layers, multiple aspects. And I don't have the slide in here, but from my previous talks, I always talk about the best way. Any solution has three components: selecting the right solution, configuring it and installing it properly, and then maintaining the solution. Unfortunately, for most small businesses, they don't select a solution carefully. They just get whatever everybody else tells them they should get. It's thrown into the company and then never looked at again. And very often when we're finding companies have been hacked, it's because no one was doing the due diligence of carefully selecting the right product, implementing it very correctly, and then constantly monitoring and maintaining it for the protection of the company. Slide 2 of 2, I want to go into the 5 most common social engineering attacks. So social engineers are hackers who exploit a weakness that is found in all of us, as we've already said, the human psychology, and they're going to leverage different media. Now, they may use different media where they're maybe making a phone call, maybe sending in an email, I don't know, all kinds of different ways of doing it, but they usually, the attack falls into one of 5 different schemes or methods. By the way, before I do this, the word spam does not mean hack. I get this all the time. People say, oh, I'm getting spammed. Are we vulnerable? Spam is just unwanted email. Or could be unwanted mail in your mailbox, but it just denotes unwanted stuff. It doesn't necessarily connote evil intent. Phishing, hacking, stuff like that, that is evil intent. That would be a good thing to start teaching your employees, because they want to be saying, if there's a fire in the house, you want them to say there's a fire in the house, not some other word that does not denote what's actually happening. Okay, I get off my sandbox now. The 5 most common social engineering attacks: phishing. The key takeaway here is these might be emails, these might be phone calls. The bad guys are after typically names, addresses, social security numbers. But when we're talking about business identity theft, what they really want is username and passwords so that they can gain access to other systems. Phishing usually is based on a sense of fear. There's urgency involved. They're making threats. Common attacks here that use phishing is, your mailbox is full, please click here to resolve. Your bank account is overdrawn, please click here so we can clear this up. We're the IRS, we didn't receive your payments for taxes last year, please click here. You see a theme, click here. They're going to redirect you to somewhere where they can do some bad. Your people need to know not to do that. Pretexting is similar, but it involves a larger, more elaborate, fabricated scenario. Also, pretexting often is much longer in timeline than just a phishing scheme. You get one phishing scheme, it's usually done. They don't keep sending you other requests. In pretexting, I've seen some where there's follow-up emails and follow-up phone calls to continue their scenario and spinning their yarn to get that victim to fall victim to them. Baiting is the idea that you can get something free by clicking here. We'll see these all the time. I get them periodically. They're offering me a free video service. They're offering me a free laptop or something else. But the idea there is they're holding out this bait in order to entice you to click their link so that they can do that. And we actually had a client that's done this a couple times, unfortunately. She's gotten emails and she keeps clicking the links and putting in her username and password for the company, and their email has gotten taken over several times. And I keep talking with this employee, please stop doing that. Well, it looked legit, and I've come out and met with her, and I said, no, it isn't. See this and this and this? Those are the clues that this is not legit. But she keeps doing it. That company may need to make a staff change eventually. The quid pro quo attack is less elaborate. It's more honest. If you do something for me, I'll do something for you. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. We see these much less, but employees that are disgruntled can often take advantage of those. Tailgating is usually a physical attack. It's when the hacker doesn't have access to an area. They will do a process we often call drafting or piggybacking. They'll try to follow in somebody who is authorized and get into an area. So this one, the last one, number 5, tailgating, really is not done via email or phone calls. It's done in person in the offices. And I've been in offices where I've seen people attempt to do just that. So those are the most 5, and hopefully that's a little helpful. Some example emails. So our first one here, they're telling us that your W-2 information needs to be updated. Click here. I'm biting my tongue here because I want to tell you the secrets of what not to do, but I'm going to hold that for the end. Anyway, next one. Outlook. This is very common, and they're going to look differently, but they're the variations on the theme. There's something wrong with your email. We weren't able to deliver an email. Your mailbox is full. Something. Oh, we're increasing our security standards for your benefit. All kinds of promises are made. Please click the button here and update your account. And when you do that, the first thing they ask for is what's your username and password. Variations on a theme. Next one, Netflix. A lot of people use Netflix. I often hear individuals tell me, well, I don't use Netflix. This wouldn't work on me. Well, that's true. But they're sending these out in such massive quantities, they know a percentage of people will click on this. They are going to reach a percentage of people that have Netflix and are going to click. I'm always amazed when I see the people who don't have whatever they're offering. They don't bank at said bank, but they click the email anyway because they're curious. And curiosity killed the cat, proverbially. Next one. Oh, here's a good one. Bank of America. All they have to do is go to the company's website and download the logo and stick it at the top of the email and offer it. Happily, most of hackers are really stupid. Or actually, let's put it this way. Hackers come in 2 flavors. There are the smart hackers who write the software and they're brilliant, unfortunately. And then there are the hackers who execute the stuff. They're usually not very well educated, and they're using software written by the brilliant guys. Happily, most of the people who execute the attacks are not that smart. If we look in the middle of that email, it says, please sign in to and your account, which is a smaller text, and then it enlarges. Real bank probably would not do that. We'll often see misspellings or grammatical errors on emails. These are clues that this is being done by small organizations, not like your bank, and certainly not in a professional capacity. But again, I'm going to bite my tongue. I'll hold it for the end. I'll tell you how to save yourself from these. Finally, last one, TurboTax. Well, this one's very popular at tax time, but it could be any product that they're offering. And again, they're making a statement that there's a problem and we need you to fix it. Click the link. Now, next, this is the area that really steams me. Why, oh gee, Ed, why do you hate social media? I don't hate social media. I like social media, but there's a problem here. Unbeknownst to you, most of your employees use your company credentials for their personal accounts. I'll say that again. And lately on my webinars, I've been picking on a gal named Jill. She's fictitious, but let's say Jill, you have a username and password that you enforce at your company. Jill's not very creative and doesn't want to think about this or think about other passwords. So she uses that same username and password for her Twitter account, or her Facebook account, and her Flickr account. Accounts, is particularly these big ones, the larger you are, the more likely you are to get hacked. They do get hacked. And once the hackers have access to this information on one of these accounts, they then use computers to scan the internet, and they're looking, I was thinking from an analogy standpoint, pretend they have a key and they could drive around your town looking for every door that they can try, and oh, lo and behold, these doors opened with that key. Well, that would be difficult. It's a lot of work driving around. With computers, it's easy. You write a program that scans the internet, it approaches firewalls and servers and cloud-based repositories of data, and it tries those username and passwords. This is huge. And it is one of the main reasons that we're seeing companies' data getting accessed by unauthorized people, because employees are using passwords at multiple locations. Here's an example of some of the hacks over the years, where I'll start at the top. In 2013, Adobe got hacked and 152 million accounts were accessed, usernames and passwords. eBay, 145 million. Where's some recent ones? Well, the eBay was 2014. Ashley Madison down at the bottom. I see them, 2015, very small, only 32 million accounts got accessed. But when we're thinking about that, where's my slide of Ashley Madison? Ashley Madison was an affair site. People looking for a little excitement in a lot of their life would go there and look for other people to hang out with. It is widely assumed that the main reason that Ashley Madison was hacked was to get these usernames and passwords to not to get into the systems, but to blackmail important people who had accounts on Ashley Madison, so that they could blackmail them to getting access to their companies or government or whatever resources they had. So you have to think outside the box. A recent attack, I mean, very recently, Google announced that their Google Plus social media network got hacked 7 months ago. The big irritating thing to me is it took them 7 months to announce it. The personal information of 500,000 people were accessed, usernames and passwords. Those hackers have been using those usernames and passwords for several months now, scanning the internet, looking for doors that those usernames and passwords would open. That is the danger. And frankly, one of the reasons my industry gets up in arms when somebody gets hacked and doesn't announce it is because it doesn't give us an opportunity to lock the doors with different locks to protect the companies. So I think you're starting to see it. Another kind of attack is phone messages or calling you up. This is one of the oldest scams in the business, but it's still very popular. Hi, and we could insert anything in here. I'm your bank. Hi, I'm your IT department. Hi, I'm Microsoft. And they're going to say things like, we can see that there's a problem on your computer and we want to help fix it. I tell our clients, if we ever call you and we don't identify ourselves, say thank you very much and hang up, and then call our company. Don't trust, or trust but verify, but be skeptical. that last one I put on just for fun. It says the police. This is a true story. Last year, a group of hackers were calling around to people, and they were saying, "We know you have pornography on your computer, and we need you to come down to the station and pay a fine, or for your convenience, we have a website that you can access here and pay your fine online." A lot of people were paying the fine online. One poor gentleman went into the police department to pay his fine and was arrested. So it was the bad guys tricking the person into going into the police department. But your employees need to be told in advance what to expect. Now, let's get into the good stuff. What are the 5 ways to protect your business from falling victim to these hackers who are employing social engineering to attack your company? It starts with policies. You need to write them. And people often say, well, what about security yet? No, the first step is deciding on what is acceptable and unacceptable use of your computers, writing this as a policy, and having your employees sign it. I think it's very important that employees have signed an acceptable use document for how they are expected to use the computers. They need to acknowledge that business credentials or usernames and passwords are never to be used outside the company for anything other than company resources. That you insist on different and complex passwords being used for every account. And I know some of you are groaning. That's really difficult, Ed. I can't keep track of all these passwords. You're probably going to have to utilize a password manager. I kind of like LastPass, but no one stays on the top of the heap very long before they get supplanted. So go online and look at reviews for these things and try a few out. LastPass, the reason I like it is it works really well for individuals, and there are corporate versions of it where we can set it up for the company to manage all employee passwords. And I think it's pretty cool. Again, assume dishonesty in requests, and your people need to be told that it is company policy that they verify the caller identity or the person communicating with them, ask questions, and ideally then hang up and follow up. So an example is if I got a request to transfer 30,000 from the CEO of a company I was working at, I thank you very much, close the email, and then call the CEO to verify that he or she really wants that money transferred. That's how that one company got saved. Another example is if I've already talked about the IT company. If they're calling you and saying that they're here to help, call them back after hanging up and see if you can still reach that same person. So these are all policies that need to be in writing, and your employees need to sign and acknowledge that they're agreeing to follow those policies. Now, security. So you need protection to protect what is valuable, and that's your data, and that's your company and your reputation. But I always think about the 3 areas we like to start with is protecting and securing the network. How is everybody interconnected? The endpoint. An endpoint is just a computer device. It could be a computer, like a desktop computer, a laptop, a tablet, a smartphone. It's the device that you're using to access everything. And these things have to be secured individually. What protects a network does not necessarily protect the endpoint. And what protects the endpoint almost never protects the network. And similarly, the data itself, wherever it's stored, it has to be protected. We like having data in centralized areas, but also having off-site storage of data elsewhere. We really like encrypting the data at rest, in transit, and wherever it's being backed up to make sure that the bad guys can't get it. Slight tangent here. We had a client last year who was in China on business and left his laptop in the taxi. There was a lot of important data on that laptop. Happily, we'd insisted that he have really stringent usernames and passwords. the whole laptop was encrypted, and so was the data on the device. When he contacted us in a panic about losing all that data that was confidential and important on his laptop, I said, don't worry, we're ordering you a new laptop. It'll be here by the time you get back from China, and we have backups of that laptop so we can restore it to the way it was from the last backup yesterday. And rest assured that your laptop was encrypted, it was locked securely. The only thing that we're going to be out here is the cost of a laptop. You don't have to worry about the data. And in reality, it's the data that we care about. That's the expensive part. The devices are getting cheaper and cheaper. So that's important. Also, some other concepts on security: sandboxing. Sandboxing is the concept of having data analyzed elsewhere. Today's firewalls are, well, hell, yesterday's firewalls. They're only so powerful, and people seem to expect the world of their firewall, and they can only do so much. About a decade ago, firewalls really were very limited in their capability, and then we started doing universal threat management on the firewalls, which is a fancy way of saying that the firewall would start to analyze what was going through it. It would look at the packets of information. But firewalls are only so powerful. Otherwise, they'd be astronomically expensive, and they aren't anymore. When we can't reach a determination about the safety of the data flowing through the firewall, we need to do something else. That's where sandboxing comes in. Today's better firewalls, and the ones we highly, highly push on our clients, what they'll do is if the firewall can't make a determination, is this safe or not, it will redirect that data up to a cloud, several cloud servers, and run tests on it. That process is called sandboxing, and it's a really, really good thing. So sandboxing is great. IDS is intrusion detection systems. Very few companies, particularly small and medium-sized companies, run intrusion detection systems. I think it's a big mistake. If the bad guys get in and get passed through everything, we need to know about it. 2FA stands for two-factor authentication. I refuse to bank with any bank that doesn't support two-factor authentication. Well, what do I mean by that? Traditionally, when you're logging into a website, it's username and password. These are two things you know, and it would be easy for a hacker, relatively, to get a hold of those things. But what if your bank or whatever site you want to go to insists on two-factor authentication? You put in your username and password, they send you a code on a device you may have. It may be a key fob, it might be your phone, and then you put in that phone. The likelihood of the hackers knowing your username and password and having your phone is much, much, much less likely than them just knowing your username and password. I was actually thrilled last year when Twitter, since I do our social media for our company, insisted on 2FA, which means every time I want to tweet for the company, they send me a code when I put in my username and password, and until I put that code into their website, they assume it's not me. Two-factor authentication is a really good thing for businesses. We use it here internally, and we encourage our clients to adopt it. And I've already alluded to these last three. We highly believe in encrypted hard drives, encrypted data, and encrypted backups, just in case somebody gets access to stuff that they shouldn't. Number two, well, that was number two. Number three in the top 5, education. This is crucial. Your weakest link are your employees. We need to do it and do it often. Sagacent does this for clients. We offer employee security awareness training. I tend to say at a minimum, this should happen every year. Ideally, small companies could get by with maybe twice a year. Larger mid-market companies, this should be quarterly. It should be a discussion. We want to help employees understand what social engineering is and how it is leveraged to attack them. We also want them to understand what are the attacks that are being done today in the world that you should expect against you. So discussing those recent attacks, it's not what you've experienced here at this company, but it's what's going on out in the world and out in the wild. Number 4, we need to test the systems. And I'm not talking about just the security software and hardware, but the people themselves. So one thing that we do for clients or we advocate they do for themselves is periodically run security drills. Run a penetration test. That the penetration test is where we scan a firewall from the outside and we try to get into the company, and we're looking for vulnerabilities at that company. Really, really good thing to do periodically. And then social engineering tests are where we're going to send emails, not too often, so they're not expecting it, but periodically we're going to send them emails that look like offers and see which employees fall victim to it. The only way to know for sure how things are operating is to test them and to measure the results. And your company, you want fewer and fewer employees falling victim to this and use it as a learning opportunity as opposed to a punitive measure. And together, things can get better. Now, 5 of 5, accountability and responsibility. This is the last one, but it's also kind of the beginning. And it starts with management. One of the weakest links in security at most businesses I see is management. They may adopt policies or allow us to implement certain security things, but as long as I'm not inconvenienced, and I often see them wanting to go around these security measures, your employees find out. Your attitudes on this is infectious, and they will either adopt or ignore the policies based on what they're seeing management doing. And management is the one that has to accept that we're going to have certain policies and insist that all employees adopt them. So I really think management has to take this responsibility and accountability for being the starting point of this, because until you do, the employees won't either. And then, as we've talked before about the testing and looking at what's going on in the company, if there are problems, and I was picking on this fictitious person, Jill, if Jill continues to have issues, you may have to take corrective action. So those are my 5. We are now into the Q&A session, and I am looking at the question board, and now would be your time to type in any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer. Anything having to do with security or identity theft at businesses would be acceptable. Treading water, waiting for your questions. I haven't gotten this question yet, but I did last time I did this. Somebody asked me, do we help companies develop policies internally? Yes, we do. We actually have some templates. It's one of the things I love doing for customers is to sit down with them and talk to them about, their business and what their needs are, and develop policies around what they need, or at least create the drafts, and then they can go from there. We also do security audits and help them understand where the weaknesses are in their systems. Once a client becomes a Sagacent client, however, we're managing all that for them so that they don't need to do it themselves. But I still think that having meetings with management and sitting down and making them aware of what we're seeing from an IT perspective is really, really important. I've gotten 2 questions. Well, one's a comment. I look forward to absorbing and reviewing the presentation. You're very welcome. And the other one, how often should you change your passwords, and should they be different for all accounts? Well, great questions. So there are organizations that think you should change your passwords every day. Unless you have, or every month or whatnot, unless you have a really good password manager, you're not going to want to do that. The more often people, let's say this, without a password manager doing it for you, the more often you change passwords, the more likely your employees or yourself are going to write these passwords down on a Post-it note and stick it to the monitor. All passwords need to be different for all accounts. We don't want the hacking of one account and the compromising of the usernames and passwords at that account spreading to others. That's what hackers employ. So it must be different for all accounts. Every password I use is different. Now, in my case, I tend to change my passwords annually. I do it over the Christmas, New Year's break. So I have very complex passwords, some up to 16 characters, with capital letters, lowercase letters, symbols, numbers. And yes, I use a password manager because I couldn't keep track of it otherwise. But I typically only change them once a year unless the application or service I'm using insists on it. We use QuickBooks internally, and it insists on changing the passwords every 90 days. So I change that password every 90 days. But I think unless you've got a password manager, forcing people to change things frequently can be fraught with problems. A lot of hacks have been perpetrated through people coming into your office acting as delivery people or maintenance people and looking for the passwords that are stuck to the monitor. You have to be very careful. How can I report a fraud email? Well, it depends on what the fraud involves. If it involves a government agency or something that they're going to care about, you can do that. But in all honesty, most never report spam, because again, I just said that those are unwanted communications, whether they're email or in your mailbox. But phishing stuff is frankly so prevalent. Half of all email these days is expected to be these fraudulent email attacks. Telling anybody about it really doesn't help, unless it's a very personal attack of a specific nature. So these generically 99%, there's no reason to report it. And by the way, with our scanning systems, we can tell which is real and which isn't. I'm being asked which password manager is best. Well, it's really up to the user. I always think that the tool that you can use is best. And from time to time, I change my opinions. I've talked a little bit about LastPass. It's what I'm using today, but I can't guarantee I won't change in a few months if I find something better. There's a lot of tools out there. I plan to do a webinar in a few months where I'm going to review a bunch and have screenshots and things like that. But it's really up to you. What do you feel comfortable doing? You have to be a little careful with some companies. I'm seeing a lot of consumer level antivirus tools that are trying to see how they can milk more money out of you. And they're offering backups of your data, and they're offering password management and identity theft protection services. You want to be getting the best of these things, not just necessarily the bundle. Okay. What tools would you stay away from? Oh, good question. My personal pet peeve right now is I see a advertisement coming on TV that just steams me right now. I don't want to say their name so I don't get sued, but you'll see them. They're antivirus protection, and they talk a really good yarn about how this is going to protect you from everything, and the US government uses it and school services use it. Security is multiple layers of multiple tools managed in a really good manner. And I will tell you that antivirus alone is not a good tool. Antivirus alone is what we used to use decades ago. And here's the thing. We used to stop viruses and Trojans and worms and other attacks because we would look at the code, the lines in the code, how it was written, and we would develop a thumbprint. Kind of think about your fingerprints. And if I take an image of your fingerprint and then I run around your house looking for evidence of other fingerprints, I can go, aha, this person clicked here. Older antivirus tools used to just look for the code. The unfortunate thing is most hackers are leveraging software today that's called polymorphic. It constantly changes. So just having a fingerprint or virus definition, as we used to call them, is no longer good enough. Because the things have changed. So today, Sagacent, we like multiple layers. We have firewalls at the perimeter of companies looking at the data coming in. We have 3 different programs we run on every desktop, laptop, server. Those are antivirus, anti-malware, and another program called Cloud Shield, which looks at the reputation of where that information is coming from before it allows it in. It's that cocktail of multiple things in place that really protect the company. I'm also getting another company. Will your free network assessment go over our personal identity theft risks? It could, certainly. The free network assessment that we offer is where I or one of my company employees comes out and we look at your environment and we discuss what are your needs, wants, concerns, and we share with you what we're seeing. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. I like helping people. So getting to see your company and how it works and then telling you what I see is always makes me happy. Anyway, I'm going to move to the next slide. If you have any more questions, I'm still watching for them to come in. So, as promised, first, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. All registered attendees of this webinar will receive an email in a bit with a link to a recording of this webinar once we finish wrapping it up. I'm also offering all attendees of this webinar a free 30-minute one-on-one phone consultation about your data security and or data access controls so that I can answer your questions. It's not on here, my mistake, but we also had been advertising that we're offering the free network assessments. Those are certainly in place. When you get the email with the recording, you have the opportunity to request those. And finally, my contact info is included below so that you can reach out to me personally if you have any questions. It's how I've grown my company for nearly 19 years. I like helping people. And you know, it's funny, I joke with people and I say I see myself as a superhero because that's what we're doing. We're really helping businesses, protecting businesses so that they can grow. I hope that you've enjoyed today's webinar, and I hope you'll join us for future ones soon. Thank you very much.